Sue Borison from Your Teen Media. Today I'm here with Craig Knippenberg, child family therapist in Denver, Colorado, and he's the author of Wired and Connected, Brain-Based Solutions to Ensure Your Child's Social and Emotional Success. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me on.
So at this moment, we are all experiencing a lot of quarantine fatigue.
Yes.
And there's this kind of internal battle I think that most of us are dealing with, which is wanting to kind of stay in what felt like a safety net, safety bubble, or throwing our hands up and just giving up and going on out. So
Right.
what do you recommend to parents of teenagers at this moment?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. I've been doing a Facebook Live program since this started for families, and I've put it into sort of phases. First was that shock phase as we all started to shelter. We all thought it was going to be over in 2 weeks. And my 14-year-old said to us, "Oh, great, I get to be sheltered with you two for 2 weeks." And we were like, yeah, well, it's been a lot longer. The next phase I called the waiting place, a play on Dr. Seuss, where we were just in waiting. This phase I'm calling out of hiding. And if you think about hide and seek, you all run and the seeker is looking for you, and you watch behind a bush and you look for a chance, maybe just take a few steps out, but maybe you go back in, or maybe you run to the next bush and hide again, and waiting till you can be safe to return to home, right? Back to base. And I think that's the way you want to help your family conceptualize this phase we're now, which is, okay, we're having a little more freedom, but we still need to keep an eye out for the virus, and we need to be safe. A lot of the kids I've been talking to is about having small hopes for the future. And so one of the families I see, they wrote down on slips of paper all the things they lost during this period of things they're upset about. And I had them put it in a box and add it to a shelf, put it on a shelf. And then they got a decorated jar and they're writing down what they hope to be able to do soon. So you create small hopes, and then you sort of create a staircase. Now, every family staircase is going to be different than other families. So I recommend you start out small, maybe with a play date, or get together. If you got the teens, we don't call them play dates, but a get together with another teen whose parents have sort of had the same approach you have, so that trusted circle that you have at your house, you're looking for other families who have similar approach to this pandemic in a similar way.
So you're encouraging families to consider expanding that pod. I think
Yes.
we've fallen on this word pod.
Yeah.
And so at this moment, it seems to make sense to you that we would encourage our kids to also make pods of their own.
Yes, the kids, they really need it. The last 2 weeks, I consult for a private school in Denver and then run Colorado's largest private practice. And the kids, they're just irritable. And the teens are irritable. Everybody's irritable.
So are the parents, by the way.
The parents are too. Oh yeah, they are. And they really need to have some social contact with appropriate distancing and masks.
Would you say that parents should get involved in determining who's in that pod? Because some families may not have been as devoted to quarantining as your family was.
Right. For younger children, that's easier to do. You usually know their parents, and yes, I would coordinate that with other parents and kind of consider who you feel safe with.
Teenagers?
For teenagers, the issue there is when our kids got into high school, we didn't know their parents, the other kids' parents anymore. They've got friends from all over the place, the neighborhood, the city, and you don't necessarily know their parents. So that gets a little trickier. So you have to have a family discussion about, for your teen, who are they thinking they want to connect with? One of the kids I was seeing last week, he had a plan for 2 buddies. His mom does know the 2 best friends, to have them over for a day. And then the next was going to get to see his girlfriend, who's been staying home with her family. So they were all good, safe bets that the family's been following similar protocols as this young man's parents.
Yeah, but I think you raise a really good point that at the end of the day, the conversation has to take place in our home, and then we have to trust our teenagers to follow the guidelines of the home.
Yeah, and that's where a good family meeting about, okay, let's design our staircase. These are the steps we're comfortable with you taking. We also have to keep in mind that you might be disappointed and have to go back down a step. So you really have to be flexible with your staircase, because if there's another outbreak or the governor here in Colorado changes the rules, then we have to go back down.
Okay, so that raises an interesting point. There's not one rule for everyone. We are living in a country that's divided by states, with states dictating what happens in those, and households don't have the same rules.
Right, they don't.
And
And
yet,
that's
and yet the message that we're getting from the medical community is that as individuals, we impact the health and wellness
the
of the whole
whole, right.
society.
Yeah.
So now what we're seeing and hearing a lot from our parents is that there's just a lot of judgment right now about
There,
where someone else draws the line,
right.
and
No.
even feeling watched about where you're drawing the line. How do we navigate this?
Well, you start with the fact that you have the freedom in this country to parent the way you choose to parent. And that's at all times. So when I was a teenager, my next door neighbor friend, he got to go to the James Bond films. My mom didn't allow us to see James Bond movies because she didn't care for portraying women in bikinis. And I can remember being so upset all the time with her. Why can't I? He gets to. And she'd say, I get to make the rules in our house for you that I feel are the best. So that's your starting point always as a parent, because these are always issues that come with teens. Now it's just that extra health standpoint. And I think encouraging your teens to follow the news in terms of what the health people are saying. We want to direct our family from a health standpoint. And we're going to take that approach. We encourage you to learn about it. You can talk to them about it. Here's the latest things they're talking about for our health. I
That's
think
great.
you run the risk if you don't start letting them out some more. You run the risk. What happened here a couple days ago, the teenagers were gathering. We have a reservoir close to my house called Cherry Creek Reservoir, and I ride my bike out there every day. In the last week and a half, as the high schools are finishing and the kids are graduating, virtually graduating, I kept seeing the number of kids on the beach just grow and grow. And there was no social distancing, no mask. Then I had a patient who told me about the various things they were doing there. And I kept, every day I'd go by, I'm thinking, this is like the old movie Beach Blanket Bingo or something with Frankie Avalon and Nat Funicello. And they're all out there. And then 2 days ago, the state park police showed up and they scattered them all. So the beach went from packed to cleared out.
So the kids are going to test it, and hopefully there'll be some controls put in place by our government.
That's what you're hoping, because there's always, if you think of the game tag, there's always one or two kids who just immediately run out, right? And they get caught every time. And this is really being stealthy about coming out of hiding.
That's
and
great.
Really being smart.
So I want to say that parents are all exhausted. I believe that kids are also exhausted, but since we talk to parents of teenagers, we are all exhausted right now.
Yeah.
Where should we be trying to preserve our energy to get through this?
The thing for me is to still try to have a little bit of structure. One of the teens I saw last week, he's an athlete, he plays lacrosse and basketball. And I said, man, you should do 2 hours in the morning of weights and core, do 2 hours in the afternoon of cardio. You have to have a schedule. Wake up at the same time every day, get 2 hours in, then have some free time or do some hobbies, and then have a schedule for the afternoon. I'd also recommend to parents that you do like an all-house cleanup, like maybe right before dinner, because the big issue, you have to remember your roommates. They're a family, but you're also roommates. And teenagers have this habit of leaving their shoes in the middle of the floor, their smelly socks. They get the milk out for their cereal. They don't put the milk back. They drink out of the milk carton. All these behaviors that just drive you wild as a parent. Now, if you go hunt your teenager down every time you see one of those infractions, you're in for just a lot of pain and a lot of arguing. So what I tell parents, especially with teenagers, spontaneity with teenagers is the enemy. So teens already are spontaneous enough. They come up to you, can I go to Bob's house? Can I do this? Can I do that? Can I go past curfew? And you really want to slow them down. Well, you got to slow yourself down too. So I would discourage parents just spontaneously erupting over that pair of tennis shoes and save it for, let's have an all-house cleanup every day. Well, it's 30 minutes. And it's just like I was in a fraternity house in college. We had an all-house cleanup on Saturdays. We had donuts and scrubbing bubbles, and we just cleaned for an hour. I had a lot of fun.
Okay, so that leads me to so I imagine in your frat house and in your own home that not all cleaners were equal.
No, not at all.
Right. So in family, there's a lot of watching to see, like I have one kid, you just ask it and it gets done. And I have one kid and you can nag over and over again and it never gets done. So
Well, that's where you schedule it so you can have a hook. And the hook is, hey, if you want to have your evening gaming time or your evening whatever, this is the list you have. I'd give them a list. We do a list here for our 14-year-old. She has it every morning, list of here's your chores for the day. And so you have your all hands clean up and you say, here's your list, and you're not having any freedoms till it's done.
Okay, I like that. That's great. I'll get back to you on how it works in my house. Okay, so there's so much tension around everything that's happened. It's, as you mentioned, way longer than anyone anticipated, with a chance that we get around two. How important is it as parents to keep peace in the house right now?
Well, I would cut down on the stuff that's not very meaningful, like the tennis shoes, and save it for the cleanup time. I'm also telling families to try to have, like, maybe twice a week, 2 to 3 times a week, you have a family meeting and you discuss the issues that are going on, how are we doing with complying with the rules, etc., so that you can have more of a calm, less spontaneous, calm time where you can all just talk about, here's how we're doing, how's everybody feeling, what are we irritated by, what differences could we make in the family. We had one parent I talked to recently, and I said, I'm a big believer in closed doors in the bedrooms. And if mom needs time and she goes in her bedroom, closes the door, you don't knock, you leave her alone. And your teen needs that freedom too. They need to be away from you. So this is a time where separating some is a good thing, is to be away from each other, have the doors closed, unless you're concerned about safety issues for your teen or addictions. And then at the dinner table, you can have some of those deeper conversations and about what their real angst is and how they're feeling about it. And keeping in mind that all teens go through a brain phase, which leads to teen angst. So they have less impulse control, they have twice the emotion, and their social processing just explodes. And so they're always upset about something. They can go from 0 to 90 in a heartbeat, and back to 0 a heartbeat later, and your hair's just turned gray. And you're like, how can you feel better now? You're like, this is wild. So the more you can kind of structure them and have those discussion times, I think that's one of the better solutions. You're not going to prevent them all, and sometimes arguments are needed. Sometimes we need just a vent. I got a little upset with my daughter a couple of weeks ago over this online school stuff, and I kind of got a little too upset. The next morning, I apologized to her, and she said, "It's okay, Dad. It's the corona. We're all stressed."
So don't sweat the small stuff, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay, so this is our final question. What's your best piece of advice for parents of teenagers at this moment?
Get them involved. They've lost their jobs for summer. They've lost camps. They've lost their normal sports activities. They have to be doing something. And the number one thing, the big part of my book is to make your empathy a verb. It's about how to help your kids be more social and have empathy, and then do something with their empathy. And right now is the time to get involved in helping out an elderly neighbor, making signs for your neighborhood to encourage people, anything that can be of benefit to others. I had one teen who's been making mask parts with his 3D printer, or it's a time where the teens can do some of their own remodeling. My daughter, first 2 weeks, she took out all her furniture outside and repainted it, and then repainted her room. She starts high school. Hopefully will be in school this fall. But she has a whole new look, cleaned out all the middle school stuff, threw away all the stuff she didn't want anymore, and sort of a fresh start. So that's another opportunity where you want them being active, and teens need to work off their energy, especially teen males. Teen males need to be doing something. So anything you can find as a way to get them involved would be good.
Thank you so much for your advice, Craig Knippenberg, author of Wired and Connected. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Susan.